my name is Kevin Garrison. I'm a design director at Willoughby Design, and today I'm going to talk about my workflow using the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. Here are Procreate, Adobe Capture, and Adobe Illustrator applications, so you can kind of get a visual reference of the applications we're going to be in. Procreate is a great illustration application that you just pay one fee and can do anything you want with it. It's very versatile. You can do line art or painting techniques. They also have animation that they've added to it, and also three-dimensional assets you can upload and use now in version 5.2, which actually just released this past week. Adobe Capture is a great Adobe platform for capturing anything from typography or patterns or black and white line work. You can do all sorts of things in Adobe Capture. It's actually a great tool. And of course, Adobe Illustrator, which is just a great design tool that we all use in all kinds of different ways. So they are constantly integrating that with Adobe Cloud and Adobe Creative Cloud libraries. So it's just all of it's becoming more and more connected to the iPad and the desktop and the cloud. So it's really a great set of tools. So first I want to go through some iPad design examples that I've recently done. Well, I'll go through them one at a time. The first one I want to share with you is a project we recently did for VaccinateKC.com. This was a regional initiative to get shots in people's arms and reaching herd immunity. It takes 2 million arms in the Kansas City region. I think that's like 70% of the population until everyone gets vaccinated. This campaign will probably run, the next few years. I don't know. It's running right now. You can go to VaccinateKC.com and see all the assets and keep up with the current counter, which is what's showing down in the lower corner. So we created this campaign to be very modular. This was going to be a crowdsource campaign where anyone could access the assets through a cloud library and create their own assets, because we really wanted to be able to empower different organizations at every level, hospital or community outreach, or all sorts of different entities that were reaching and looking for assets to communicate how to get shots in a positive way. And this is kind of where we started. So in Procreate, created all these elements, and we essentially created a library. And you can see the color palette's very bright and colorful and cheerful. We really wanted to have a positive attitude about getting a shot in the arm. This approach was very modular. It's actually in a grid on purpose, so everything can be kind of cut apart or used different ways, in a square on social, or in a one line on the side of a bus, or 2 lines for a billboard. So it really lent itself well to a variety of different applications. And you can see all these different pieces were actually drawn in the iPad and then colored in Adobe Illustrator. Here are single-use marks in each individual ad. So the color palette really holds it all together. You can kind of see how this rolls out in a campaign. Here it is in an outdoor board used in a grid of 4 and a grid of 6. Get the COVID-19 vaccine. All the early calls to action were very clear and very simple. You just had to go to VaccinateKC.com, and then you could find out where your vaccination point was, or when you could get it, or who qualified. This is just posters. These are called wild postings, I guess is what we call them. This would be a vertical poster on a pole and kind of inside directional, telling you get the Vax Facts and where to be, room 213. And this was company sponsored by Black & Veatch. So you can really see different ways to activate this campaign. And also even, vector art that goes on t-shirts to screen print. So really versatile in all of its applications across multiple touch points. Let's go into Procreate on the iPad Pro. Just click on that. So here's the artboard in Procreate. You can see where you've got all your different assets. I've created stacks at the top, and essentially you do that just by dragging one piece of art on top of the next, and it starts a stack. So for each project, I typically will name it the project, like Panera Holiday 2021. Some of these just say stack, but here's this one. I can actually click on this stack and rename this 2 million arms. 2 million arms. I'm going to clean this up. I try and really label everything, keeps everything organized. So there's that. So you can see when we click into this, I've got all my different arms that I had created for this campaign. You can see them in black and white. I did all of them in black and white just as a way to open them and convert them to line art quickly. I did one in color because I just kind of wanted to see how it filled and make sure everything was closed in that way. But for the most part, I would create an art file. Essentially, you go up here to New, up here in the corner at plus, and you would pick a screen size or a square. I had created a 1080 by 1080 300 DPI master file that I can click on that I pretty much did all these in. So I would create a new file with those dimensions, and I would open it. And this one's, I'm gonna hide a few layers here just to kind of show you how my file came in. Drawing guide. So when the file opens, you pretty much have a blank canvas, and you can do several things at this point. You can add a photo or a file if you've sketched something on a piece of paper and you want to use that as a base, as a piece of art to draw from. If you want to, either place it on the side and reference it, or you just literally have a pencil sketch you want to trace over, that's an easy way to do that. There is a little trick here that I've learned recently. You can insert a photo if you drag left on the image. It's insert a private photo. So if you're doing a sketch and you have a sketch that you did in your sketchbook, and you want to take a photo of it and then insert it as a private photo, later if you want to share a video of your process, that image doesn't show up. It just is, the image will render without your drawing inside of it. So everyone thinks you're just a master at drawing from scratch, when in reality you're tracing artwork you already sketched in your sketchbook. So it's really kind of I was like, how are these people sketching these perfect drawings without any reference? That's how they're doing it. So I just inserted a photograph, a sketch of an arm I did. You can click on this and then just tag it on the bottom of this list here. It says reference, and then that appears under the image name, which that's just for your own reference to say, oh, that's the reference image. So above this, these layers really aren't anything. I'm going to clear these because these are earlier versions. So essentially I would come in, and at this point you go in and you need to decide what kind of pen you're going to use for your project. Procreate has so many brushes that you can get either with the brush or with the actual application, or you can buy brushes, or there's brush packs that artists give away for free. So if you really just kind of go out and research on the internet, you'll discover all sorts of fun brushes. You can make custom brushes. There's videos and tutorials. I won't get in that today, but sometimes as you are building brushes, we have clients that we do surface pattern design for, and some brushes, I always go back and be aware if you're using a brush by an artist, if they have any copyright or licensing agreements that you can't use that on product. We have examples of, we have done some designs for surface design, and they're going to print millions of copies on a piece of paper. And if you are using a brush that's very distinctive in any certain way, and they have a license agreement that you have to pay basically an extra price for that, you need to be aware of that. So just be careful as you go through your career. This is kind of new territory for the most part. People, I think, are still trying to figure this out on that level, because everyone wants to license fonts and license photography and license illustrations, and for the most part, they're going to figure out, some designers are going to license their brushes. So just be aware if you do download brushes that they're royalty free, or if you're going to use them, it's not anything that is something that's you have to backtrack to. So anyways, that's why I have a KG custom brush set that I've actually gone in, and sometimes you can see how a brush is made and create your own version of it. And then you own that brush, and you can do what you want it to do without any licensing issues. But please check with a lawyer or your counsel before that goes down. So we're going to I'm just going to pick an inking brush. These are all part of the iPad Pro brush set. You can see each of these, Mercury, Baskerville. You can see all these different textures. For this particular project, I picked a studio pen because I wanted a really clean line, but you could certainly pick some of these brushes with all this texture. This would be a great texture, and really when you're doing this, you got to kind of play with some lines and see what this looks like. That's too much texture. Here's gel pens. You can see a thick and a thin with the pressure. So this would be beautiful for typography. There's just different brushes and different looks that you can get. So for this project, I had a very mono weight pen, and I pretty much just kind of played with how thick I wanted it. I know that I needed all the edges closed because I was going to have to fill the shapes later. That's important if you're going to break it apart and you need to fill the shapes. You're going to have to close all the gaps. So one of the other things you can look for up here in the wrench icon, there is a section called Prefs for preferences, and there's some overarching brush controls that they've recently added to Procreate 5.2. Connect Legacy Stylist, I don't really know much about that, but here under Pressure and Smoothing, you can pretty much modify some settings here to get the pen and brush strokes to do. It just smooths out some of your line work, where instead of it being exactly as you would draw it, it's correcting some of that stuff, especially if you're doing some typography or elements like that. It really kind of smooths it out. And you can kind of see, if I turn this up to 78, you can see if I draw a line, you can really see how that's bending and correcting itself. That's, even though I tried to bend it sideways and go in a real tight fashion, it's really cleaned it up for me. So that's a really helpful way to have a more controlled hand. It looks more professional, and you're really just using a tool to kind of clean up your artwork. So I did that. If I set that and then I was to redraw this artwork, you can see, and again, you just gotta kind of get in here and just draw, and then you can see if I go to do this, honestly, I kind of feel like this is too much stabilization. I'm almost like in a small space. I'm not getting the artwork to do what I need to do. So I'm going to go back under preferences and actually go back to smoothing and turn that back down maybe to almost 34%, 35%, and then I'm going to go back out, and you can see I'm going to draw it now, and now I'm getting a clean line, but I'm able to draw my scallop edge. So it's real easy. You can see I'm just drawing over something, and like I said, you can do this freehand, or you can do it on a sketch you've done just to kind of get everything worked out. It's probably what you guys will do. Draw a sketch and then bring it in, because you're doing typography, I think. But so there's a band-aid and an arm, and then I'm going to draw some pearls. And again, I don't really like the way that looks. So you really, if you don't like it, you just back it up, and it's not like drawing on paper where you have to erase and have a big mess. I'm just going to redraw it and back up and do it again. So here's the art that I would at this point say, okay, that's one of my arms. I want to take this now and I want to upload this to Adobe Illustrator as vector line art, because right now it's a raster file. So up under the gear again, you have this button here, third from the left at the top, that says share. So you would click on that and you have all these options to share the image. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this image and we're going to export it as a TIFF. We're going to use a TIFF for now, and we're going to push it to Adobe Capture and process it through Adobe Capture. So I used to take, you can also, another workflow for this is if you draw something and take a photograph of it, you can open that image directly from Adobe Capture. But Adobe Capture now, if you're in Procreate, I'm inside Procreate, but when I go to export as a TIFF, it gives me Adobe Capture in my options of where I want to put it. So I'm going to click on Adobe Capture, and then it says open in Adobe Capture and post. So what I will do is I will hit post, and then it opens Adobe Capture, and then there's my file in Adobe Capture. So I've kind of come in the back door into Adobe Capture through Procreate. So you just got to kind of pay attention where you're at. So there's all sorts of things in Adobe Capture, materials, audio. This is new, things I haven't seen before. I don't want to do that right now. Don't allow. Shapes is what we want to click on. So something kicked me out. Let's go back out. I got to go back out. Let's go back. If you get lost, up here in the upper left corner, see where it says Procreate with that little arrow? I'm just going to click on that and go back to my original image, because was in Adobe Capture through Procreate. So again, click on the little wrench, click on TIFF, slide over to Adobe Capture, click post, then it opens. So I pushed too many buttons before and I got kicked out. So anyways, this says type. I do not want that. Basically what that does, I think if you draw a letter and then hit type, it's going to try and match that type to the Adobe font library and give you a font that matches it. So that's more of a font matching tool. So we're going to click on shapes, and there is in Adobe Capture, there's a bar here that kind of allows you to lighten or darken the image. So if we had done an image that had a little bit more grayscale to it, this would be picking up and taking out information as we did it. But since we did it pretty much in black and white, we're just going to kind of leave it in the middle and hit save. So at this point, there's some options to refine the image, crop the image. If you want to rotate or do things like that, if you've scanned an image, these are ways to kind of edit this art. You can add smooth. That's another feature. If it gets a little rough, if you hand drawn it and not taking a picture of it. So I'm going to turn that off. But you can also hit erase if you want to erase some elements that you decided, maybe I don't need it this way. There's always the back button down here on the lower right. You can also hit done up here in that corner. You can add stuff if you decide in here I need to add another element in this. Like now I want to add, that's probably too thick, so I'll go back here and I can control the brush size. Maybe I've decided I want to add a little plaid at last minute, or checkerboard pattern here at the last minute. Oops. So you can see you could do things like that at that stage, or you could just go back into Procreate and do it as well. So at this point, you're going to hit done and then hit save. And this is where this is going to actually load this. You're going to save it to a library. That's where it's going to tell you to save it. So what we want to do is earlier, and you can do this early in the presentation or early in your file management, or do it now, I guess. But I've created a folder for this, or I could probably create a new one. So I am going to create a new one. Let's just create a new one called iPad. I always get the thing here. Let's call it iPad tutorial. And create that new library, and you can see where it says save to, and then you're going to have this shape name 7. You can give it a individual name or just leave it, if you've got 10 shapes, it'll go shape 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can click on that and rename it now if you wanted to, or you can do it later inside the library in Adobe Illustrator. So that's up to you. It doesn't matter either way. It's still going to save it. So at this point, I'm going to hit save. And what that's done is that's saved that into a library in the Adobe Cloud that is called iPad Tutorial. So when you go to Adobe Illustrator, which we're about to go to, you're going to open this library, and this object should be there. If it's not there, make sure your Wi-Fi is on the same network as your iPad, so you're all connected. But you can also, I've discovered, push it to the library to make sure it shows up. So right now, I'm just going to go to Move To, and then I'm going to make sure iPad Tutorial up here is clicked, and I'm going to hit that, and it says moved. So I feel like, okay, I feel like it's going to be there. So let's go to Adobe Illustrator. So I have opened Adobe Illustrator in a new document and just named it Parts, because this is what I'm going to be putting my artwork in that I've created in Procreate and processed through Adobe Capture. And what you want to do from the beginning is go and make sure your libraries are open. And you do that by going to Window and then scroll down to Libraries about midway through the page. So you'll click on that. And over to the left, or wherever your libraries show up in your tab, what you're going to see is a list of all your libraries that you've created. And you can do this for different projects or clients or however you want to do it. I have personal captures that I constantly keep up with, new pieces of artwork that I scan or draw or reference, and typography and all sorts of different things. And they come in as graphics. So we created this iPad Tutorial library, and all I got to do is click on that, and you can instantly see shape 7 that we created earlier is in this library. So it's already appeared, and all I have to do is click on it and hold my mouse down and then bring it over to my page and drop it. And essentially what it's done, it's given me a vector image, and it comes in fairly large, but I can scale it, maybe it's 50%. I just need to get it back down to the page size. I could do Control D. And you can see there's my vector artwork. You can see it in line art. Now it looks like when I rotated this artwork in Adobe Capture, when I was messing with it, it looks like some elements on the edge. See those black lines? That's kind of like trash that came in from Adobe Capture that I don't want in there. All I'm going to do is take my hollow arrow over here from my tools, and I'm just going to select that and then hit delete, delete, delete. I don't need that, delete. So I can zoom into this artwork now, and if I go to wireframe, which is Command Y, you can see there's my artwork in Adobe Illustrator, and it's outlined the artwork because it's given me a vector object. So I can now open my swatches. So you can create a new swatch library, default swatches, and if you click on this artwork, it's essentially a compound path, and you can make it a color. So based on the design that I shared earlier, what we need to do is basically this artwork comes in as a compound path, and compound paths are artwork that's closed and you can see through it essentially through the closed holes. But if you release the compound path, it basically opens the entire object as a flat, like everything turns to the main color. So now I can go in with the isolation arrow and just change the color of the art fairly quickly. Just hold down Shift and go through this. And this is how I would just recolor the artwork fairly quickly. You can see when you roll over it too, it's highlighting the little elements to show you what you're clicking on. So there's the Band-Aid. You can have a fun little colored Band-Aid. So you can see if you hold down the shift key, I can pretty much go through this little plaid pattern now and click all the elements, and then I decide, okay, I wanted that to be purple plaid. So right there, that's a piece of the art that would be one element of my pattern that I have created in Procreate and then import it into my Adobe Creative Cloud library. And as you continue to add more elements, you can see you'll get more arms. So here's a library where I've kind of created a bunch of different arms. I've already drug them in here. Again, some of them come in, if you click and drag, they come in at different scales, but I can, again, this came in as a compound path. It's one color. I want this to be, broken apart. I'm going to go up under Object, Compound Path, Release, and that's going to give me my vector artwork, and then I'm just going to recolor all this artwork into a different color. And that's kind of that's the drill, how you would do that. So here is the finished artwork that I created as a set of objects. You can see the wireframe, and this is how this was created. You can see the color palettes, bright and cheerful, and everything's here in one document, and this is how we created the pattern. The second project I want to share today is called Tradición Tapas Collection. This was a packaging project we did for a company here in Kansas City called Spice and Foods, and they came to us to create a brand and packaging system for their private label collection of sauces that they rebranded from a existing group of products into a brand new system. So we took the Tradición name and added a descriptor to Tapas Collections, which really positioned this line of dips and sauces for sharing. We explored classic type and modern type and different colors and even bottle types and the shapes of labels that would stand out on shelf and pique a food lover's sense of adventure. So we really, after talking to the client and getting the creative brief, they were really interested in this idea of a flamenco dancer. So we really did some research into flamenco dancing and just all the different poses. And from there, I used Procreate to roughly sketch different versions of the flamenco dancer and the dress, and was really able to utilize saving the file and doing different poses and different arms and different directions and things like that really made it easy to move through the process of ideation and final execution. So this is more towards the final piece of art. You can really see the power in the woman's arms and her dancing in the flamenco dress. We really were interested in getting this real textural look to it, since it was a heritage brand that really came from, homemade recipes and all natural ingredients. It was done in micro batches, so we really wanted to look authentic. Lo mejor del corazón was a term we used on an icon on the packaging that really said from the heart. So we really wanted to create this brand that felt authentic and real. So you can see here the 8 different flavors. This was all created using one piece of artwork out of Procreate, and then once I got my one piece of master art that I created in Procreate, I downloaded that as a Photoshop file in layers, and then colorized the layers and did save as in Photoshop to create each different label in Adobe Illustrator. This is where the final art was created. So I just wanted to quickly get back into Procreate and show you how I created the flamenco dancer. And I'm not going to get too far into this as far as technique, but I will share kind of the final version and how this file came to be. And you can kind of see, here's the flamenco dancer, and as far as how she's constructed, I really spent a lot of time on this, determining the brushes to really get this nice painterly effect. I wanted it to feel loose, like a painting, and you can really see the texture in this. It really feels like a brush was used. And knowing that this artwork was going to be used fairly small on a jar label, but also they enlarged this for a trade show banner that was life size practically. So you really kind of got to be aware of what the scale of your image is. And I can show you that here. I know I can go back to Canvas and do Canvas information, and we can see the dimensions of this artwork are 8 by 10 at 300 dpi. So I really try and make sure my artwork's at 300 dpi, so I'm aware that this can be enlarged fairly well. I also have been using a fractal enlargement application that lets you enlarge photography, and Photoshop kind of does the same thing. If you are wanting to, if you get something that you need to enlarge substantially, the technology to do that now is fairly good. So you can see here, this drawing was constructed. Instead of drawing everything on the same layer, which you might think, oh, it's a painting, I'm just kind of going to do this in one artboard. But really knowing when you're working on an illustration for a project that there might be edits later and you might need to recolor things, I really drew things on separate layers, like even the dress highlights and the dress shadows you can see are on different layers. The base of the dress is on a different layer, and other elements, more detailed shapes, are on different layers. This allows you to go back, if you need to go back later and edit sections, they're easily editable. And later down the line, when I exported this to Photoshop, I just collapsed all these dress layers. And you can do that really by just dragging them all together into one group, like that, creates it into one layer after you're finished. Or you can go and select, I think you hold these, go like this, can right swipe on all these, and then hit group. So now this is all in a group that I can rename to dress. So now this is all moved together, and if I wanted to move it, I can click on my tool, and then I'm moving the entire dress as one object. But I'm also able to go back in here and toggle down, and each layer is still editable in its own way. So that's a real handy way to kind of keep everything organized. Same thing I did here with the arm and the body. I had done some earlier versions of arms that I wanted to keep just to build up and show the direction I was going to do it. The hair is done that way. You can see, you know, there's different highlights on the hair. So there's my highlights, more shadows and shape to the hair. I wanted to add some more wispy. That was one of the things they requested. And then there's the base of the hair. So everything's really isolated and easily editable, I guess. So, and then the background texture, again, that's on a separate layer that I went in and painted different brush strokes, and you know, you can go into all your distress packs and things like that and really just add, you know, all sorts of different effects. Whoops. I don't know how that got out there. So brush wise, you can, you know, draw some more texture out here on a, you know, usually you want to make sure you're doing that on a different layer. So I was going to show you really the animation, kind of how this works. So let's go over here. This is kind of one of the fun things you can do. You can share the video, and there's a time-lapse replay option. So I'm going to click that, and then we'll watch the video. So here's the artwork. You can see how there's an underlayer sketch that I used briefly to kind of frame the dancer. And then this is really just a 30-second video that really rapidly goes through all the different layers and versioning that was part of the process. You can see the poses are changing, just building up layers and textures to create the final piece. So the last thing you're going to do from this stage, when you've pretty much decided this is the final artwork, or even at this stage, you can say, well, now I'm going to move it to Photoshop and finish the final artwork and add typography or Illustrator. This is where you would go from Procreate, and now you're going to basically go back up here to the wrench icon, and under Share, it gives you all these different options. I had, during the process, saved out JPEGs to share with the client so they could see work in progress that we would just place into a PowerPoint slide as we were presenting progress. So at this point, I would click on, you can export this as a Photoshop document. That's PSD is Photoshop. And this is going to export the file with all the layers that you see over here. It will open in Photoshop exactly like you've saved it in Procreate. So at this point, you go to the wrench, Photoshop comes up, and then I personally, you can either save this to a Dropbox folder, you could save to files, which is a whole nother thing that you can organize that way. You could save the image to your iPad photos, but what I do honestly is just click on AirDrop. You make sure you're connected to your Wi-Fi, and you can send it directly to your device, and it goes into your downloads folder or wherever you have those elements going, either to your desktop or your downloads, and then from there you can open it in Photoshop and continue your project. The third project I want to share today is a project we recently did for Panera Bread for holiday 2021. So that's actually right now. This stuff will be releasing. We did a whole gift card program for them, and I used Adobe Procreate in this instance to do the animation for their digital cards. So overall, the marketing objective here was to get guests to consider Panera for gift giving ideas for stocking stuffers, or even gifting their coffee subscription as a gift for people to enjoy even after the holidays. So as a full campaign, this is kind of where we started. We created all the "You'll Love This" elements to this campaign that included gift cards, merchandise that went on the counter, a coffee sleeve, the envelope for the gift cards, even the shopping bags that were used for to-go orders. And then we did a floor merchandiser, and then even the elements that went onto POP in the photography were tied back to the campaign in a way that was visually connected. So with this in mind, we were tasked with how do these flat cards that we had created a set of then translate into illustrated cards. And since Procreate had recently introduced animation to their format, I really thought, well, let's try to do this in Procreate in the animation. So we chose two cards, "You'll Love This" and "Bread," which is kind of a play on cold winters with the snow falling, since that will run predominantly after the holiday season. So you can see here I was again able to make multiple versions of a single piece of art and experiment and break the mug apart, and just it was really something that, again, Procreate was very flexible in allowing me to create all these different parts that I used in the campaign. So here is the Panera "You'll Love This" with the coffee steam rising from the holiday mug. They'll use this most of the season to really sell their probably coffee subscriptions and just the gift card element on their website. And then this card as well was created with bread. So these are all separate layers in Procreate, and then they're all linked together in a timeline, and then you can use that to create your animation, and you can control the speed and the frame rate and all these other elements that really can customize this illustration to really feel, I call this the Charlie Brown Christmas snow. So it's really kind of a nice way to show the snow. So back in Procreate, we're going to show a little bit of the animation. I'm not going to get into the animation tutorial. You'll have to check back. Maybe we'll do that another time where I go through and show some animation techniques. Honestly, I went on YouTube and Googled how to do animation, and I'm the king of watching 3 seconds of a video and then going off and trying and doing something myself and completely failing and having to really slow down and go back and watch it about 10 more times before I catch on. So that's just a learning process everyone's going to go through, and you'll continue to do that really through your whole career. Before long, all this stuff will practically function on its own. So I had originally created this artwork with the vector art in Adobe Illustrator, but I brought the card art into Procreate essentially as blank art. You can see, as I'm kind of backing this off, you can see how you can see all the different layers of the card, but I brought the art in without the steam element. So this is basically essentially my keyframe, and then from this point I inserted the steam as frame 1. And the way you'll build this up is at that point you're just essentially creating, what you end up doing is going up here to the top, and there's a way to start the animation process, and that's what ends up down here at the bottom where it says play. So you would create every single frame that's going to be in your stop motion animation, and what that ends up doing is creating all the pieces that then you can run. So from that stage, you can see it down here I have play, and I would hit play, and then I can see my animation, what it's going to look like. And I have settings. You can run this in a loop where it goes top to bottom. You can do ping pong where it runs frontwards and then backwards. You can kind of see at the bottom down there in the frame preview what it's doing. Loops just going one direction. And then one shot, meaning it's just going to run once. So I had exported this, I think, in a ping pong, because it'll just run back and forth, and the coffee just looks like it's currently, emanating from the mug and not going anywhere. But you can also change the frames per second. That's 6 frames per second, but if you want it to go faster, you can adjust it. So it's just kind of figuring out. I wanted the steam to look natural, not something that was moving too fast. An onion skin frames, that's a method of illustrating one layer on top of another where you can actually see what you did before, so you can see the motion and the movement. So you can pretty much just explore that process of animation, and it's great to learn that process. Here's the bread card. Again, I brought in a base piece of art that I created in Adobe Illustrator with typography and layered that in, brought that in. Actually, I brought in all the separate pieces. Everything's on a separate layer. So even the background. So the background came in, and then I created the type on a layer. If you wanted to do each letter animated separately, you would bring in every letter separately, or you would have to cut it out and put it on its own layer. But then the Panera bread is up in the upper corner. I knew that it's kind of locked down into template format. And then this is the foreground snow. You can see how that's marked here in the foreground. And then I know I wanted some background snow, like I said before, and that was the snow that is screened back, but then you can do this here under opacity, and you can see where I can control the opacity of it. So I knew that snow was in the background, so I wanted it to look less opaque. And from that stage, I pretty much created this base art, and then when you do add frame, you go to the next frame and you would create a whole nother set that then you basically move the snow. That's essentially how it works. Again, like I said, it's a fairly simple process, but you can go in and learn this, or we'll do another tutorial at another day. So, but again, this is how you do animation. And then I would go in at the end of this and let's get rid of this frame because I don't want to mess up my animation here. Clear or delete. So you can see how it's playing. So at this point, after you've created the artwork, pause. Again, you have all these options to export your animation, and you can export this as an animated GIF or an animated PNG, which is more of a transparent situation if you needed to have something that was transparent. This is what you would probably use if you were doing stickers. I think that's how they would use little stickers you put on your Instagram or TikTok feeds as a transparent sticker, because you can cut it out. An MP4 is another format that you would export if you were going to put it on Instagram, because you can't export animated GIFs for that. But I know animated GIF is what I wanted to send. And again, you have all these settings. Your final thing, you can edit your frames per second or how it dithers, and some really fine tuning if you prefer. And then you would hit export. And again, you have the same setup where you have it before. And I typically, at this point, I always just love to hit airdrop and send it to my desktop, and then I move it into my job folder and continue the project from there. So it's all really a great connected tool, and that is just a quick way to look at animation. I hope that information was helpful today to get a little behind the scenes on how I use the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil with Procreate. There's not just one way to do all this, so if you have a different workflow, or you'll constantly potentially learn different workflows, you just kind of work through what works for you and what works best. It really is a great time to be a designer with all these tools at our disposal. It's never been more easy to create artwork in any place where you're at with an iPad Pro. Good luck on your projects. Be sure and hit subscribe and like on our Willoughby channel, and check back for updates as we'll continue to add potentially more tutorials. Thanks.